All right, so I always kind of like to start with what is planning, and it's really obvious to us what planning isn't, because you know when it doesn't work, right? When you haven't thought something through, you stick your filing cabinet right in front of the door. But really, what is it? I mean, it's just how are we preparing ourselves for the future? And as a county, obviously, we have to think about how we grow, where we grow, how we don't grow, how we, how we plan for things like the flood. How can we better prepare for that? So it really is just truly looking into the future and planning and preparing for that. But we also do that with a lot of community input, and I'll talk about that, because we don't want to sit in a vacuum and assume we know what to do just by sitting in our offices. The planning department actually operates under two different budgets, and I'll go into more detail, but one is actually from the general fund, so that's where sort of all of the fees and the taxes go, and then the county allocates through the council a certain amount of funding to planning. And underneath that general fund are several different divisions that are funded that do different things. And we also have what's called the Neighborhood Redevelopment Agency, which is actually a millage. It's a direct line of a tax allocation to neighborhood improvement, and I'll go into detail about all of those in just a moment. So my current budget for the planning side of things, not the neighborhood, so under the general fund budget is about $1.5 million. That goes mostly to salaries, obviously. You've probably seen that in most departments. We have about 20 folks that work in different divisions in the planning department. It's about $1.2 million goes to them. We do spend a lot of, a decent amount of money on training and professional memberships, keeping people with the accreditations that they need to have, keeping them current on planning trends, and so that they can do the best work for the county. So we do have and are grateful that administration supports us being trained and us being current and us knowing what's going on in the world of planning elsewhere, so that we can bring best practices here to Richland County. Support all the sorts of things we need just to keep the office operating, phones and paper and whatnot, and then professional services, which helps us do certain things that maybe we need a little bit of experience or expertise outside of our current staff. Again, we do have about 25 people in the planning department when fully operational and fully staffed, and expect you to be able to read this, but I'll go into some detail. Those kind of vertical lines are the different divisions we have within planning. And I do have a deputy director that helps me, who's also the zoning administrator. So between the two of us, we really pretty much manage all divisions of the department. So one of those divisions is called is land development, which is kind of what we consider current planning. So this is your how we actually develop the land. So from beginning to end, if you're a developer and you want to build 400 units, or you're the Title Max folks and you want to rebuild your Title Max, you have to start in our department, and what you want to end up with is actually a permit that lets you do what you want to do on your property. So we kind of see that from beginning to end. Folks will come to us and say, I want to do this with my property. How do I do it? We have a very thorough and well-defined and described process for how to do that, and help them do it that's according to our code, which I'll tell you about in a second. So we do have rules for how you develop your property, and we have to make sure that you follow those rules and you're developing in a manner that we want you to. And how we do that is through what we're calling the development review team, and that's really just staff. It's folks from different departments. Andrea, who you just saw, she does sit in and make sure that plans, when they're submitted for development, are following what they need to from a floodplain perspective. The fire marshal's involved, public works from an engineering perspective, so they could check for those stormwater issues like you asked about. So it's a team of staff, not just from the planning department, but a team of staff that reviews these very large development plans to make sure that they comply with all of our individual rules for how we know it's best to develop the property. We call that development review team.
If I wanted to, I'm retired, so I'm not going to take your job, but
Oh.
I'm just curious. if I wanted to go into your job, what would I do? I mean, what was I major in college? Something?
Yeah, there is a major. It's urban and regional planning is actually what mine is. And that's how most folks that I think do what I do would get to that point. But I also have folks that are from public administration, geographers, anything that's kind of land-based or policy-based, a program. My undergrad's actually in sociology, which kind of helps me tie the human factor into everything I do, but I have a master's in urban and regional planning.
Okay.
Closest place that has that program is Clemson. I did not go to Clemson, but that's the
Do you have to live in the county to have that kind of job?
No, in fact, I do not live in the county, but some places do that. Cities do that frequently. Cities do often require their upper management to live within the jurisdictions of their municipality, but Richland County does not have that requirement. All right, so another one of the divisions within planning is zoning. I'm sure folks know, a decent amount about zoning. So each individual property within Richland County has a zoning designation to it. For those that you live on are usually some sort of a residential zoning, and then there's commercial zoning or industrial zoning. We have a division that works on that, and what they do is they oversee the rules that apply to zoning, but they also oversee the land development code, which gives us the standards by which we develop property based on that zoning. So the group I just talked about that helps do the permitting has to make sure that everything that you put on a plan and everything that you engineer and everything that you say you want to do meets the land development code. And our zoning division makes sure that you do that. And our zoning administrator specifically is the one that makes sure that everything that happens in the county is compliant with that. Obviously, we can make changes to those. You may see a lot of rezoning requests around town, signs that look like this. If you wanted to change the rules that apply to your property or you wanted to change the zoning, you would need to go through a process that we oversee. It starts with the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is a board that is appointed by council members. We have 9 folks that sit on the Planning Commission. It's a voluntary position. And basically, they are required by state law to provide the vision for growth in the county and make recommendations on zoning and land development. So they make a recommendation to county council. So if you were to want to change the zoning on a piece of property you owned, you would start with this. You'd see this yellow sign go out. You'd meet with the Planning Commission. Planning Commission would make a recommendation, and then it would go to county council. Of course, once it gets to that point, you see another sign, and it would look like this. So this tells you that it has now left the Planning Commission stage. There's a recommendation that's been made, and the county council is going to hear it. This is a zoning public hearing. We hold them every month. It's an opportunity for anybody to come and speak either on behalf of or air their concerns or their complaints about a rezoning. And that again, that's offered every month. That's required by law. So anytime a change is made to these rules or to zoning, we are required by law to make sure that we open this up to the public. We notice it in the newspaper, and then we post these signs on the property itself. So if you ever see a sign like this and you have a question about it, the number's there. Give us a call, and certainly come and have your voice heard at our meetings. Typically, those meetings are the 4th Tuesday of every month, almost always. I can't think of a time that they haven't been, but that may come up that it isn't. We also help, we provide management really for the Board of Zoning Appeals, and this is a group that meets less often, but they're also appointed by county council. And they're really a kind of a quasi-judicial group that sees certain requests for how to use property or how to make a variance. So say you can't meet the code as we've discussed with you, and you can't do exactly what you want to do on your property, and you want to talk to somebody about how you might be able to get around the rules per se. It's called a variance, and this group would see that. They don't get issued often, but it's certainly an avenue that's open to folks. Probably most importantly, though, for the citizens of Richland County, we have the planning and zoning counter. It's downstairs on the first floor, just below us. We're open during county business hours. Anytime you have a question about what you can do with your property or what's going on around you, if you see something going on, come to this counter, and our staff will take care of you. We also have within the planning department another division that just does mapping. They help us just purely with GIS mapping for the planning department. The county has their own IT department, and I'm sure I'm guessing you met with them, maybe not. But there is a county GIS department, but we have folks that are specific to planning, so they can help us more quickly address mapping needs and help us do analysis. And that's really what they do. They can help us with development review, so they can put a project on top of our GIS map, our aerials, and they can coordinate that with, say, floodplain and see if there's going to be any conflict. They help us with addressing properties for E911. We are required by law to do that. Obviously, they help us with zoning, and if you are developing property, or say you're subdividing it or splitting it up into a neighborhood, that needs to be given to our GIS mapping folks so that they can actually put it on a layer like you see up here in the upper right. So this is a proposed development. Somebody wants to create these 40 or so lots, and they will put that on top of our information like Andrea just talked to you about. And so you see the blue up there is the floodplain that helps us ensure that we're not doing what we shouldn't be doing. They may help us also with looking at other areas, as Decker Boulevard on the upper left, making sure as we redevelop the corridor we are conscious of all the water that you see there. So that's what they help us with in the GIS department within the planning frame. I don't know why it does that. I just keep forgetting to take that off. The last division within planning, before I talk about neighborhood the neighborhood improvement program is long-range planning. So what I just kind of described is sort of the day-to-day, everyday, how you currently develop your property. But we also have to look out, and for obvious reasons. We know we're going to grow. Currently, the county's got a population of about 400,000, just shy of 400,000. Most of the property is either developed or it is undevelopable. Maybe it's a floodplain, or it's wetlands, or it's lakes. So that leaves us with so much land to build upon, but so much population we know we're going to grow. So we want to look out into the future and actually make sure we're accommodating that growth in a responsible, sustainable manner, and in a way that's consistent with the way our citizens want us to grow. Just a important figure that the Central Midlands Council of Government that helps us with our population census information says that we should grow to about 451,000 by 2035. So that's an additional 50,000 folks we have to house.
Bottom one about the population over 65, is that why we're seeing so many assisted living places?
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is important information for us to know too, to make sure that we're providing the services and the places to live and work and shop that meet those demographics. So it's an interesting time that we're actually in right now, in that the population over 65 and the Gen Xers, the younger group that's actually leaving the home, they're both the two largest cohorts that we have, which has never been the case, and they want and need different things than we've currently been building. What's that?
Said problem is most of them aren't leaving the house.
Right. Right. But when they do, they want a different product than we've been building. They typically don't want to move out to a half-acre lot in suburbia. They're wanting to live somewhere they can walk and get their coffee, and they're just wanting a different product than we have, historically built. So we have to be conscious of these different demographics and what they need as we want to grow and we want to provide services and amenities for the citizens that we hope to keep and attract. So those are important statistics. So that's why we have to look, really kind of far ahead, and we do. We look 25 years ahead with what we call our comprehensive plan. State requires us to have this. So the state says you have to be strategic about thinking about how you're going to grow and where you're going to grow and how you don't want to grow and where you don't want to grow. And they do this through the comprehensive plan, and they require us to have these certain elements. And so basically these elements just say, give us a snapshot of where you are now. What is your population now? What do you expect it to be? And what are your goals and objectives for accommodating that growth? And you do that for all of these different elements. Most important to our decision making and council policy guidance is the future land use. So this really helps them identify and set a vision for how we grow in the future. We have just updated that plan, and the reason was we weren't growing the way we wanted to. We had a lot of rezoning requests. We had a lot of inconsistencies between what our code required and what our vision for how we should grow should be. Think about, I guess everybody would agree that the Northeast grew really quickly, right? Are there some lessons learned? Are there some things that we could have done differently had we been more prepared for that kind of growth? And if we had taken the chance to do this sort of planning, would it look differently? Would the services be in place? Would the infrastructure be there to better handle that growth? So that's really what we were trying to achieve with this update, which we just did. We adopted it about a year and a half ago. And again, it's a long-range vision for what Richland County should look like in 25 years. And just to give you a snapshot, this is kind of one of the recommendations that came out of that effort. We hear a lot, we're uniquely rural, we're uniquely urban. So balancing that is a real trick, if you will, but it can be done. So if our goal is to protect rural character, which we heard over and over again we had 15 public meetings, we need to make sure that we do some of these things that are listed here. We need to create really truly zoning districts. We need to create policies that help protect the rural character in the rural parts of the county, which prior to this update we didn't have. So these are the sorts of recommendations that come out of a comprehensive plan. And so every time a decision is needed to be made by county council, whether it's on a rezoning or on development standards, they should be thinking about these things and the vision that's outlined in this comprehensive plan, because they adopted it and that's supposed to help guide all that decision making. So specifically with that comprehensive plan update, we were sort of challenged to do the things listed here. Balance that rural-urban character, make sure that the urban isn't bleeding too far into the rural and the urban places are able to grow the way you want them to grow. Wanted us to better coordinate with the municipalities, and a lot of folks in here I know are familiar with all the different towns and cities that are within Richland County, and all utility providers. If they're saying one thing and we're saying another, we're not growing together in a very smart manner. So There are recommendations in the plan for how we can do that, and we included them in the generation of the plan. So from the very beginning, they know what our vision is, so when they start to look at their vision, maybe we can better gel them. Specifically, the City of Columbia was updating theirs at the same time, their comprehensive plan. So together, we actually have very similar growth strategies, which is pretty cool. A lot of discussion about these aging corridors, Two Notch Road, Decker Boulevard, how we can better revitalize those, use the existing infrastructure we have instead of trying to build new. And that would help also the communities around it. And then certainly to protect our water connections and make sure that we're keeping them safe and pristine. It's a wonderful asset that we have here in Richland County, and didn't want to ruin that through growth. All right, so the last thing I'm going to discuss with you is what's called the Neighborhood Improvement Program. So that's that other arm of the planning department that has its own separate budget. It's funded under the Neighborhood Redevelopment Millage. It was established a little over 10 years ago by County Council, specifically to really get into our neighborhoods and help to revitalize them, improve them, give them a voice if they don't have one, and specifically to create what they were asking for were master plans for some of these neighborhoods. How do we do the second and third life of some of the neighborhoods in Richland County and do that with a strategic planning process? So NIP really has three broad goals. We want to protect and revitalize our established neighborhoods. And we do that through these master plans, which I'll tell you about in a second. And we also have a neighborhood matching grant program. So any neighborhood that has a formalized HOA or POA can apply for a small matching grant from us every year, and it helps them just do certain things in their neighborhoods, things that maybe they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. The second goal is to empower neighborhoods to sustain a healthy community through civic infrastructure. In other words, we want to help you have a voice, have the training, get the people together that can help improve your own neighborhood yourself, so helping kind of empower you through those tools. And then to strengthen communication between the county and neighborhoods. So we have different avenues by which we bring people together when needed. We can disseminate information pretty easily and quickly through the connections we've made. And we created what's called the Richland County Neighborhood Council. So this is a place where you can come together and kind of hear what other neighborhoods are doing and learn from each other. And it's a really good resource to a lot of our neighborhoods. The budget that we had in FY16, again, this is based on a millage. It's a property tax mill. We had about $625,000 this year. We have a staff of 4, and just like before, a large portion of the salary goes to, large portion of the budget goes to salaries, about $272,000. That is, yep. That's a lump sum of benefits, insurance, everything, yep. Training, again, it's very important that we stay abreast of certain planning components and planning practices, best practices throughout the country. We're able to train them and keep them in professional memberships. Again, professional services, we do create these master plans, which I'll tell you in a minute, and usually we need a consultant to help us do that. They help us to develop it, draft it, host the public meetings for us, so we pay for that out of professional services. And then once the master plan's been adopted, we actually do implement it, and there's a lot of cost involved in that. And again, the matching grants that I mentioned to you just a moment ago is set annually too. So these neighborhood master plans, we have 9 that have been adopted by the county, and those were the original 9 that County Council said they wanted us to do 10 years ago. And they're all over. I don't expect you to be able to read this, but all the little shaded colored areas are different places that we have neighborhood master plans. And they run the gamut of what they look like. It could be a very small neighborhood like Candlewood, to what's blue there is pretty much all of Lower Richland. And we also have 2 corridor master plans, which are really interesting. So Decker Boulevard and Broad River Road, taking the length of that and redeveloping on both sides of it, including the neighborhoods around it. So all the master plans are very different. They don't look the same. They have different goals, different objectives specifically, but broadly they all want to be revitalized and re-empowered or redeveloped in some way. Again, these are the 9. So there is an actual document that gets produced, and within those documents are specific recommendations for how to achieve the goals that we heard through a lot of public input those neighborhoods wanted. So we have these documents. They're at different stages of implementation, that's what that program does, and that's what they do with their time and their funding, is actually implement these master plans. We have a new one currently underway. So the first new one that's been asked for by County Council it's actually beginning this week. It's in coordination with the city. It's down in the Olympia area. So we're calling it the Capital City Mill District area, which includes 2 neighborhoods that are within the city of Columbia, Olympia, and South Assembly. So I don't know if you've heard a lot about the old Bombers Stadium being redeveloped. So it kind of encompasses that area here in the green. And we're working hand in hand with the city because it'd be silly not to. The lines between the two, are just lines in the sand. So we're actually starting that process this week with some public meetings, getting kind of the initial stages of our research and our analysis of what's going on there, and starting to meet with folks to ask them, what do you want to be in 20 years? What do you want to look like in 20 years? You've had a lot of change, a lot of growth, a lot of the student housing with the redevelopment of some of the mills in that area. So we're starting that this week, which will be our 10th master plan. But other ways in which we've done some implementation of those master plans is the Crane Creek Park on the lower right. Huge investment on the county. So they said, all right, not only have we invested in your area through this master plan, we're also going to build a park because that was the #1 recommendation of the master plan. So kind of actually doing what we said we would do. Decker Boulevard is the international boulevard, kind of wanting to bring some branding to that theme and creating a place that really stuck out and that really is drawing attention to it. I mean, something as simple as a mural on the upper left tells people when they come here what they've driven into, and it is spurring redevelopment and it's bringing people to the area, which is exactly what we wanted to do. So with that, I'll try to answer any questions.
I've been on the site before and looked at it. I saw where y'all match up, I think it was $1,500.
Mm-hmm.
And you said you can reapply for that every year?
Yep.
So is the community master plan something different?
Yeah.
So our neighborhood, say we wanted sidewalks or we wanted a park or, we had some natural areas and we wanted trails and stuff. We could come to y'all. How much support would we need? We have an HOA.
Right.
How much support would we need from the community to make that happen? How much do we need to match?
Well, the $1,500 matching grants, that's a maximum. So if you match it per year, but if you matched it and we gave you $1,500, so the most you're getting is $3,000 improvement. You're not going to be able to do some of the big projects you've just described. People usually use those for community engagement. Yeah. Playgrounds are tricky. If you're not in one of those 9 or 10 master planning areas, that's where we have been told to dedicate the funding, the larger pot of funding. I would say to work through your council person, you do have to have a strong neighborhood support for what you're wanting to do. And if it's park related, work with Parks and Rec. But certainly put out to your council person that this is something your neighborhood wants. It's not as easy for me to just say I can fund that if it's not within those 10 master planning areas, but council can try to support you in other ways. So if there's a small need, like you need some streetscaping or lights or smaller things, those matching grants would help you with. I would say just come down and talk to us and we'll see what
Trying to figure
area.
out how to generate support in the neighborhood, because we do have some
Yeah.
communication outlets, but how much support do we need versus, how much is enough to get down to more people?
The more the better. Well, truly the more the better, because you want your council person to hear from more people than less. It needs to become a priority. So the more you can get together, the better. What area are you in?
We're in the northeast,
Yeah.
Blackfoot area.
Okay. All right. I would certainly say, is it Ms. Dickerson or Ms. Dixon? Do you know your council person? Joyce? Yeah.
Councilwoman Dixon.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say sit down with her and say that, we have a desire to do this in our neighborhood. What's the best avenue for it? There are different kind of ways that county can help you with that. It may not be this program, but there are different ones that might.
It'd be best to go to her first and get some input, and then get the community behind me, or go with the community first. Probably go with the community first.
I think so. I think you want to know that your community wants something. Yeah. You're always looking for more voices. So I saw you. It is. We do a decent job of of funding everybody because not everybody will ask for the full $1,500. So we have a staff of 3 or 4 that review the application. The application process is really thorough and it's not very hard. And we'll sit down with you and actually help you fill everything out. But then they review it to make sure that it has met our requirements. But not everybody asks for the full $1,500. So we try to fund as much as we can. I think this year we just went through. Maybe we didn't fund 2 or 3 applications out of 45 or so. Yes, but we just did finish this year's process, but start. Yes. It's going to be recommended to county council in the next couple months for the FY17 budget. But yeah, and we will sit down with you one-on-one and help you fill that out so you're most advantageous in getting what you want.
How much do lights cost? You mentioned about street lights.
Lights are kind of a mess. Typically, the folks, SE&G will put in the poles, but they're going to require some level of promise from you or the neighborhood that they're going to pay for those lights. So we've done them in the neighborhoods which we've had master plans, and the county has kind of taken that on. But in other neighborhoods, SE&G will work with you. They'll put up lights, but they need to have a certain percentage of residents in that neighborhood that are willing to pay for the ongoing monthly, which is usually not too much, but
Yeah, we
They
pay
they
street lights.
just put a whole bunch of them
yeah.
on. And you have like $6 a
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we don't.
month. So now we're paying $12 a month.
Yeah.
So all the cost really is just getting people to agree to pay.
Correct.
Pay for it.
Correct. Usually SE&G will put them in, but and just Kelly Arms is the lady I work with there. Kelly Arms is her name. It's kind of a neighborhood liaison for SE&G. I'm sorry.
Those neighborhood master plans, are those available online?
Yes, ma'am. It's not easy to get to, but if you go to planning, neighborhood improvement, and then you click on master plans, and they're all there. Mhm.
You said the council was pushing for the Whaley grant in there. How much of these initiatives, how many of these initiatives are pushed by the government versus community themselves?
It started with the community.
It did start.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, they were asking for it. They knew they were changing, and you can kind of start to see that sometimes in your neighborhood. They knew that they were getting development pressure with the Bomber Stadium. They knew all of those old mills, if you haven't driven through there lately, have been redeveloped into student housing. So there's a huge, growth in population. They knew they were changing, so they started asking for a strategic plan that helps them, grow in the way that they want to grow. They're perfectly happy with the growth. They know it's going to happen, but they want to be very strategic about doing it in a sustainable manner and conscious of kind of the direction, the feel and the character that they want to stay. So yeah, they started petitioning through their council persons to get this done. And I think because it was also so close to the city and they were doing it with their council persons and the county folks were doing it with their representation, it kind of just elevated as a need. We are looking at, so those 9 master plans were put in place because those were the 9 county council asked for when they created that program. But since we've actually completed those master plans in terms of developing them, we're still implementing them at different stages, but we are looking at what we do. What is the next phase of that program's life? Do we do more? How do we analyze where the next set of master plans should occur? And we're actually just starting that process, so there may be more that come out of that.
Are they trying to do them like to lead certification of things, like underground, putting water, different things like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's not necessarily, it may be one of the recommendations in a couple of them, Decker Boulevard, for instance.
Yeah, I know they talked about that out of that one initial area.
Yeah, so yeah, that would be one recommendation within a bunch that says if you do redevelop a facility, do it to LEED certification. Decker, for instance, wants to underground the utilities, which is progress, is a forward-thinking thing. So yeah, the master plans do recommend things like that.
This is going to be our last question, so we got one more presenter, so.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
One of the issues in my neighborhood, of the southeast,
Mhm.
the southeastern part of Richland County, are sidewalks, because we have so few. And Gardner's Ferry Road, which is our major interstate, little road that goes through, is in dire need of sidewalks. And I did start a petition to try to get a sidewalk from Green Lawn
Mm-hmm.
that goes east, because that's where the sidewalk stops, on the north side of the street. And I understand that, the more people that sign the petition, the better it will be to present to county council, but generally speaking, how many signatures, I know a lot would be the best answer,
Yeah.
but it's a full-time job to get a lot.
Oh, yeah. And
So, it's,
I don't even know that signatures matter a lot. But I think it's more the people making decisions hearing deeply that this is something that a neighborhood wants. The dilemma with sidewalks is that so much of the right-of-way is DOTs, and they're not really political types. They're not necessarily getting elected or reelected, so that they don't have such a community concern. And I'm not saying that. I don't mean that to be ugly. They just, you see what I'm saying? The penny that was adopted does have a lot of sidewalk projects within the penny. So there were some recommendations for Garner's Ferry Road. You might want to.
They had a person speaking there. It goes up to, like where Lower Richland Boulevard, it goes up along there, and then to Rapid Run, it goes
Yeah.
across there. But I don't know. My question was, there's a lot of Lower Richland Boulevard past, Rapid Run. How do you get them going further up?
Right. But there are transportation dollars that can be used for that, but it's not necessarily just through your council folks. I mean, it's got to be something that the DOT will also approve. There's county or transportation dollars that could go towards those sorts of projects. It just gets on a really long list, and I think you just got to start talking to your representatives about the need for that. And it is a lot of work. I mean, it's just. They do need to hear over and over again that this is a need and that this is, really, really required by the people who live there. Because the DOT is not quick to put sidewalks on roads.
People have been hit.
I know.
Yes,
I know.
very dangerous stuff.
I know.
People walk in the street.
And you can see it. For me, it's just it's painful to see the footpaths. I mean, people are walking it,
Yeah, I mean, people
so it
are
makes it
walking in the
obvious.
street, they're walking in the dirt, so I mean, it's not
Right.
an issue that we don't need. In fact,
Correct. You're right.
I just found out last year that pedestrians are supposed to walk toward traffic.
Mhm.
Well, I had no idea because I grew up in sidewalks.
Right.
So I didn't pay attention to whether.
That way, you're better in control of your actions when you see the car
Yeah,
coming.
right.
You can get out of the way. But that's very true. And also, I mean, from another way that we can help with sidewalks, our new development is required to put sidewalks in, unless the DOT says they don't want it in their right of way. But if a new project is coming in, then there are pretty good odds that they have to put sidewalks along the main road. And then what happens is you get a lot of disconnected sidewalks as the development comes. Right, but that also starts to elevate to the DOT that, hey, we want to fill in these gaps, because that now becomes good use of their funding from an investment perspective, that they're filling in gaps instead of doing the whole length of things. So sidewalks are hard. I can't give you a number on signatures because I don't think that that's the only way to do it. But sorry. Thanks, y'all.